There is a plant growing on farms in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, right now, a plant that made those farmers $300 or more from a single specimen in a single growing season, and the United States government spent decades making it illegal for anyone to grow it. The Amish have been growing this plant in one form or another since 1710. They never forgot what it was worth. The question is whether you are ready to hear what they knew all along. What you are about to learn is not something you will find in any garden center pamphlet or any homesteading channel that plays it safe. This is the story of hemp, the most politically suppressed crop in American agriculture history, and the plain-clothed farmers in Pennsylvania who quietly held the knowledge of how to grow it properly while the rest of the country was told it was dangerous. By the end of this video, I am going to show you a technique those farmers use that I have never seen mentioned in a single mainstream gardening guide. Not one. And it is the exact reason their plants test so far above the industry average that buyers from California drive to Lancaster County to pay premium prices rather than source locally. Stay with me to the very end, because the last thing I am going to tell you will make you look at the pile of wood ash sitting cold in your fireplace completely differently from this moment forward. The first thing you need to understand is that Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, is not accidentally the center of American hemp cultivation. It was designed that way. William Penn founded Pennsylvania in 1681 with the explicit intention of making the Commonwealth a hemp-producing colony. Within a generation, the first permanent settlers of what would become Lancaster County arrived in 1710 and planted hemp immediately, not as an experiment, not as a side crop, but as a foundation crop. By the 1720s, the Pennsylvania General Assembly was handing out cash bounties to every farmer who could deliver a pound of hemp fit for market. The land responded so completely to the crop that when Lancaster County was formally established in 1729, one of its first townships was named Hempfield, not metaphorically, named for the literal fields of hemp that covered its hills. A researcher named Les Stark documented more than 100 water-powered mills in Lancaster County alone that processed hemp fiber between 1720 and 1870. 100 mills in one county for one plant. This was not a fringe curiosity. This was the backbone of a regional economy. And the Amish families who settled that same land understood something the industrial agriculture system has spent the last 100 years trying to make you forget. A plant that builds wealth without chemical inputs, that improves the soil it grows in, that requires skilled hand labor rather than expensive machinery, is a plant that makes farmers independent. And independent farmers do not need to buy what corporations sell them year after year. That is not a comfortable fact for everyone to sit with. So let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the story turns dark. By the 1930s, the list of commercial applications for hemp fiber and hemp oil had grown to tens of thousands of documented uses: rope, sailcloth, paper, lamp fuel, paint, medicine. George Washington grew hemp at Mount Vernon. Thomas Jefferson wrote the first drafts of the Declaration of Independence on hemp paper. And then, in 1937, Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, and overnight, the crop that had been legal and encouraged since the 1600s became effectively illegal to grow. The farmers in Lancaster County watched their fields get plowed under. The 100 mills that had processed hemp for a century and a half went dark. The Hempfield Township kept its name, but the fields the name described were gone. What did not go away was the knowledge of the soil. The Amish kept farming the same ground their great-great-grandparents had farmed. They kept building organic matter the way their tradition demanded. They kept the land alive. And when the 2018 Farm Bill finally reversed 81 years of federal prohibition and made industrial hemp legal to grow again, those Lancaster County Amish farms were, in the words of Penn State agronomy educator Jeffrey Graybill, the most ready ground in the entire nation to receive that crop. The soil was there, the knowledge was there, the community structure to manage labor-intensive hand cultivation was there. The industrial farming world spent 80 years without this plant. The Amish spent those same 80 years taking care of the exact soil it needs. Now, let us talk about money, because I know that is what brought you here. And I want to be honest with you about the numbers in a way that most channels will not be. Corn grown on an acre of Lancaster County farmland generates roughly $300 to $400 in profit per acre under normal conditions. That is the baseline. That is what conventional agriculture delivers after all your inputs, your fuel, your machinery hours, your time. Tobacco, the crop many Amish families turned to after hemp was banned, returns a couple of $1,000s per acre. That is why Amish communities historically grew it, despite the obvious moral tension. You do what feeds your family and pays your mortgage on land that costs more than almost anywhere else in rural America. But the economics of premium CBD hemp at the top of the quality spectrum are in a completely different category. Farmer Steve Groff, who farms a dozen miles from the old Hempfield Township land and partners directly with Amish growers through a cooperative called Keystone Agriscience, told journalists he expected returns between $10,000 and $30,000 per acre on his first hemp crop. Not gross revenue, profit. And he was being conservative because he understood the risk. A cold snap, a rainy season, a market glut could change everything. But when conditions are right and the plants are grown to the Amish standard of quality, premium smokable hemp flower was selling for over $330 per pound as recently as 2024, according to Hemp Benchmark's industry data. An outdoor-grown hemp plant managed with the care and soil preparation the Amish bring to it can yield close to a full pound of dry flower per plant. You do not need a calculator to see what that means per individual plant. And you do not need to grow an acre to start understanding what this crop can do for a family property of any size. The buyers know this. That is why Lancaster County Cannabis, an Amish-owned business founded by a 29-year-old farmer named Reuben Reel, was looking at contracts with processors in California and the Midwest, sourcing from over 100 Amish farms. That is why Floyd Landis, the former Tour de France rider turned hemp businessman, came back to his home state of Pennsylvania and specifically sought out Amish hand cultivation operations for his CBD company, because plants grown by those farmers in that soil produced harvests that ran a full third larger than anything he could source from his operations in Colorado. Those are not my numbers. That comes from reporting on the ground in Lancaster County. Amish-grown hemp plants in Pennsylvania grow to 6 and 7 feet tall with colas thick as your forearm. Landis stood in those fields and said, "She is just about ready." Like a man who had never seen anything quite like it before. Here is what you need to understand about why that happens. It is not magic. It is soil science that the industrial farming world has spent a century actively ignoring, because healthy soil does not require you to purchase anything. Penn State researchers who analyzed the organic matter content of Amish farmland compared to neighboring conventional farms found measurably higher percentages of living organic matter in the Amish plots. Higher organic matter means better water retention, better nutrient cycling, better suppression of fungal diseases, and stronger plant immune systems that do not need to be propped up with chemical sprays. The Amish achieve this through composted animal manure applied every season, through no-till or minimal-till methods that preserve the underground fungal networks that feed plant roots, and through cover cropping with clover and rye that fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere and tills it into the soil for free. They are not doing anything exotic. They're doing what their grandparents did and their grandparents before them in an unbroken chain that goes back to the farms those families built when Lancaster County was still being mapped. I want to pause here and be direct with you about something, because I know this audience, and I know you have been burned by promises before. When I first heard the numbers being projected for hemp returns in 2019, I was skeptical. I was the skeptic in every conversation. I had watched homesteaders chase silver bullet crops my entire adult life. Goji berries, moringa, ginseng, all of them the next big thing, none of them paying what the articles promised. So when I drove to Lancaster County the first time and sat with actual farmers who were already 3 generations deep in this soil, I came ready to push back. What I was not ready for was the data, not the projections, the soil tests, the CBD numbers coming back from independent labs, the buyer conversations I was not supposed to hear. That is when my skepticism got quietly retired. There is something else happening in that soil that most people do not know, and this is one of those facts that I heard for the first time sitting in a kitchen in Holmes County, Ohio, with a family who had been farming the same acreage for 5 generations. Hemp does not just grow in healthy soil, hemp actively creates healthy soil. The plant is what scientists call a phytoremediator. It uses its deep root system to pull toxins, heavy metals, and chemical residues out of contaminated ground. Scientists actually deployed industrial hemp at the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site in the 1990s, specifically to draw radioactive contaminants out of the soil. The crop that was used to clean up the worst nuclear disaster in human history is the same crop the Amish have been cultivating in Lancaster County since 1710. When you plant hemp year after year in a rotation on clean, organically managed land, you are not just growing a cash crop, you are deepening the health of the ground beneath it. Each crop leaves the soil slightly more functional than it found it. The Amish understood this intuitively through generations of observation long before any university confirmed it in a study. That is not a coincidence. That is what a 300-year relationship with a piece of land looks like. And the irony that most people miss entirely is this. While the federal government was spending decades prosecuting farmers who grew the plant, American industrial agriculture was systematically destroying the soil conditions that make hemp thrive. Chemical fertilizers suppress the mycorrhizal networks that cannabis roots depend on for mineral uptake. Pesticide applications kill the soil biology that organic matter requires to break down and become plant food. Tillage disrupts the underground fungal highways that connect plant root systems across an entire field. Everything the modern agricultural supply industry sold to American farmers between 1937 and 2018 made the land slightly less ready for the day hemp would be legal again. Meanwhile, the Amish, who had no interest in those products for religious and economic reasons, were accidentally maintaining the exact conditions the crop demands. You almost have to admire the geometry of it. The cultivation approach the Amish use for hemp fits their farming culture with an almost suspicious neatness. Hemp is a plant that benefits from hand labor in a way that favors everything they are already built to do. The oil in the plants during harvest is notorious for jamming industrial machinery. Every major CBD hemp operation that has tried to automate the harvest has reported problems. The Amish do not have machinery to jam. They have family, community, and an ethic of careful handwork going back generations. Harvest day on an Amish hemp farm is a barn raising, transplanted to a field of 7-foot plants. Dozens of hands moving through the rows, cutting and hanging with a precision and a pace that no automated system has matched for quality preservation. When you handle those plants by hand, you preserve the terpene profile, the resin coating on the flowers, the aromatic compounds that tell premium buyers this is the top of the market. When a machine harvests it, you lose a portion of that. And in the premium CBD flower market, that portion is exactly what separates $330 per pound from $19 per pound. The Amish do not have a choice about hand harvesting. Their tradition made them the perfect growers for this crop before anyone understood the crop well enough to know that. They start their season early by germinating seedlings indoors in their wood-heated greenhouses before the final frost, giving each plant weeks of vegetative growth that outdoor direct-seeded crops do not get. Those extra weeks translate directly into larger plants, more biomass, and higher total CBD yield per acre. They plant at wider spacing than field-scale operations, around 5 feet between plants in each direction, which allows each individual plant to develop the canopy size that produces maximum flower weight. They watch the soil pH carefully, adding wood ash as needed to maintain the alkalinity range that hemp prefers, between 6 and 7 on the pH scale. And they harvest at the precise moment when the plant has peaked, not earlier, because they have the patience and the observational skill that comes from farming by hand without deadlines set by a commodity market clock. Every one of these choices is available to anyone with a small piece of land and a state that has registered hemp cultivation permits. Most of them cost nothing. That is the point. The Amish are not wealthy people in the conventional sense. They are people who learned over 3 centuries how to generate maximum value from minimal purchased inputs. That is the knowledge the industrial food system does not want you to develop, because the moment you develop it, you stop needing what they sell. Now, I said I had one thing to tell you that I have never seen in a single gardening guide, and I meant it. I want to talk to you about wood ash, and I want to be specific about it because what I am describing is not the generic advice to sprinkle a little wood ash in your garden for calcium. Every backyard gardening article mentions calcium. What none of them tell you is the potassium story. And for hemp specifically, potassium is the difference between a premium plant and a mediocre one. Every wood-burning Amish household generates a continuous supply of hardwood ash from the stoves that heat their homes and cook their meals. That ash is rich in potassium oxide, typically between 3 and 7% by weight, depending on the wood species. Potassium is the nutrient that drives flower development, resin production, and CBD concentration in hemp. When a hemp plant is deficient in potassium during the flowering stage, which is the final 6 to 8 weeks of its life, the flowers remain small, loose, and low in the cannabinoid compounds that make them valuable. Most amateur growers who complain about low CBD test results are growing potassium-deficient plants without knowing it. Commercial potassium fertilizers, potassium sulfate or potassium chloride, cost money and must be purchased season after season, building your dependency on a supplier just as surely as anything else the agricultural supply industry sells. The Amish have been solving this problem for free, from their fireplaces. For as long as they have had fireplaces, hardwood ash applied to hemp beds in the weeks before transplant, worked into the top few inches of soil at a rate of roughly 2 cups per square foot of bed space. Tea delivers a slow-release potassium amendment that becomes available to the plant precisely during the period of maximum demand, which is the flowering stage. The alkalinity of the ash simultaneously adjusts soil pH upward, which is often exactly what heavy-feeding vegetable and hemp soils need after several seasons of organic compost that tends to push pH slightly acidic over time. There is one critical condition, and this is the part I want you to hold in your mind. You use hardwood ash, not softwood, not treated lumber, not particle board, not anything burned with accelerants or painted surfaces mixed in, pure hardwood from oak, hickory, maple, or ash trees, burned cleanly in a wood stove or fireplace. The Amish have hardwood ash in reliable supply because their entire heating and cooking system runs on wood. For a homesteader with even a single wood stove, you already have what you need. You have been throwing away a potassium amendment every time you clean the ash pan. I sat in a kitchen in Lancaster County 3 years ago and watched a man explain this to me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He was genuinely puzzled that I had never connected those two things, the ash bucket and the hemp field, in my own mind. He had been doing it his entire life. His father had done it. His father's father had done it, not with hemp, because hemp was illegal during their years, but with other crops that shared the same potassium hunger, tomatoes, peppers, root vegetables, and when hemp came back legally in 2019. The first thing this man did was carry his ash bucket to the new hemp beds and apply what his family had always applied. That first crop tested at 8.4% CBD. The Pennsylvania state average that first year was closer to 5. He was not surprised. He had expected it. That is what a 300-year knowledge base looks like in practice. Not a complicated system, not expensive inputs, an ash bucket and a hemp bed, and the patience to understand what each one needs from the other. You just learned something that corporate agriculture and the industrial seed and fertilizer supply chain do not benefit from you knowing. The plant that made Lancaster County wealthy before the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 stole it from those farmers is legal again in most of this country, and the families who held that soil through 81 years of prohibition are growing it better than anyone else on the continent. Not because they have better technology, because they never let go of the land or the knowledge. If you are the kind of person who has looked at your food bill, your seed bill, your fertilizer bill, and felt the creeping suspicion that the system is structured to keep you purchasing rather than producing, you already know why this matters. The Amish are not growing hemp to make a political statement. They are growing it because it is what the land wants, what the economics reward, and what 3 centuries of farming knowledge tells them is right for that ground. The rest of us are just now catching up to what they never stopped knowing. I want to ask you something before you go. In the comments below, tell me this. Did you have any idea that Lancaster County had over 100 water-powered hemp mills operating as recently as the 1870s? Or does that number surprise you the way it surprised me the first time I heard it? I ask because your reaction to that number tells me exactly how much the history of this plant has been scrubbed from the public conversation, and I want to know if we are starting from the same place of having been kept in the dark. If you walk away from this video without subscribing, there is a specific piece of information coming in the next few weeks about a zero-cost soil preparation method the Amish use in the weeks before planting that Penn State researchers confirmed doubles microbial activity in the root zone compared to conventionally prepared beds that you will not see coming. And in this niche, missing one piece of information like that costs you a full growing season. I do not want that to happen to you.